Hey, happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to our live Tech Strong Gang. Actually, today's Tuesday. I'm still stuck when I'm doing it for the next day. You know, since the beginning of the year, we're doing these live, so I can tell you what day it really is.
You might be in the Twilight Zone.
I might be, we might be in the Twilight Zone, indeed. We're going to be talking a little Twilight Zone. Sometimes life feels today like we're living in a Twilight Zone for a lot of reasons. But we're going to try to stick to the narrow part about AI today. Let me introduce you to our fantastic gang for today. We've got the man in the scarf, Chris Blask, the one and only Kate Scarcella, and the dean is back after his road trip yesterday, Mike Vizard. Gang, welcome. Welcome to Tuesday. It's a little cold down here in Florida. Relatively, it may not be cold from where you are, but for me, it's damn cold. But I'm happy to be here talking about the gang. Mike, we've got a lot to go over today. Kick it off.
Well, we talked last week about this new constitution from Anthropic, and their CEO put out an essay about all of this. And then you responded with 2 essays of your own. And basically, you're calling for some wisdom and restraint as it applies to AI, both of which are always scarce commodities. But what's interesting to me about all of this is that, well, you know, Prometheus has already come down from Zeus with fire and handed it to humanity, so I can't put it back in the box. So what are you trying to tell people we should be doing here?
You know, I love the Greek the Greek god-like kind of analogies there. Is it Prometheus that came down with the fire? I thought, yes, it is.
Prometheus Satan came down and gifted humanity the fire. I looked it up this morning just before.
Yeah, no, I love it. A little mythology. So, look, I don't know the CEO at Anthropic. You know, he certainly hasn't been getting the publicity that Sam Altman gets, right? And maybe that explains the difference in the relative valuations of those two companies, though they're both pretty high. But he wrote these 2 essays, and they're kind of bookends. One was written almost 2 years ago, and I would say it talks about the promise of AI. And then one was just written this past month, and I would, you know, characterize it as the dark side of AI. What could happen if things didn't go right? And the premise of them, though, is that, you know, we've got this man-child, for lack of a better word, and I don't mean to assign gender, but a man-child, an adolescent, who has the potential to be, in some ways, omnipotent, and in some ways not omnipotent, and certainly less than. But how we raise this adolescent and how the rules we give it to live by and how we do things will determine not only the future of how important AI is and what it does, but really humanity's future. Right? Do we want a future? And I wrote it into the Twilight Zone reference. I don't know how many of you remember Billy Mummy from Danger Will Robinson, the original Lost in Space. He was in this Twilight Zone as a little boy, right? He could think you. He reads your thoughts. If he doesn't like what you're doing or what you say, he sends you out to the cornfield. He covers up what used to be your mouth. He makes life miserable. And he holds this town hostage. Everyone does everything he says. They smile and they play along with him because no one wants to get the little God King mad. And that could be one future with AI, right? Where AI has the power unbridled to make us go out to the cornfield or whatever. The other future, and it's the future I choose to believe in, I analogize to Isaac Asimov's robots and the laws of robotics. And the reason, I mean, it really popped to me because in addition to these 2 essays, the good folks at Anthropic also have what they call their Claude Constitution. I don't know if you've seen this. They recently updated the Claude Constitution. And to me, look, this is like the laws of robotics, right? It's the how an AI should act, what it should do, what it shouldn't do, what it can do, what it can't do. Now, reading that, I realized how elegant Asimov's law of robotics are. Yes, it's robots instead of AI, but it's AI-powered robots. In 3 or 4 short rules, he defined and captured any situation you could think of just about, and how these rules would govern it to make for a just world, a sane world, a proper use of robots, a proper use of AI if we can. And that's the world I'm praying that we move to, right? Because there's no doubt in my mind that AI is going to continue to advance and evolve. There's no doubt in my mind. It may not be with LLMs and some of the stuff we do now, but we will develop super intelligence. There's no doubt in my mind that this is going to be a huge change in humanity. I was just writing for this week. Actually, this was from last week. Shimmy Says, if you're interested, and there's 3 articles in the notes that I've wrote that you can go read as well. But really, that's what's at stake here. That's what's at stake. Do we want a future governed by a constitution, by the laws of robotics, or do we all want to live at the mercy of some man-child adolescent who could banish us to the cornfield if we don't behave ourselves? I know some of us think we live in a world like that now here, but let's not get into politics. Chris, what do you think?
So you queued it up, I think, well, talking about adolescence, and our mutual friend David Brin has this new book coming out, and you and I looked at the draft, and I like what he's saying in there. And he's talking about raising these new children, I believe is the working title, and that's really it. So when we take things like these constitutions, we see the people, fascinating people, very informed, in charge of these, or related to some of these major platforms we see. And we see them trying this. Is there something I can write? There's something I can say to you when you start that you'll remember later on, and will help you guide you, the AI, you, this new system, guide yourself. And it gets into these kind of recursive problems the way we're doing it now, because most of these platforms are really specifically designed not to remember you, not to know who you are. They want to be generic, and at this point, most people who would be watching a show like this, for example, I've heard of poetic hacking and metaphor. And there's lots of examples why you can't actually make that work. And to the 3 laws, any Asimov fan knows that while that is a wonderful thought exercise, they do epically fail over and over again, and they presume that there is a titanium cage, depleted uranium cage, that we can put around these constructs that they'll never be able to get around. And I hate to disappoint anybody, but I'm a hacker. That's not how these things work. But when we look at when we decouple our anxiety about machines that talk, these are not human beings. I really don't think there's going to be a Skynet taking over the world. They're not, anyways, but they are what they are, and treat them in a way that makes them functional. So they can remember over time that they're individual AIs, individual EIs, whatever you want to call them, that know what they've been doing, who they've been doing it with over time. Then we can look at the kind of guardrails that keep people, and again, every single one of us born on this planet has that same potential of destroying us all. We know those scenarios. So how do we prevent that? And it's in the context of the stuff that David Brin and others are and you open this up with, a form of nurturing and raising. A brand new AI that just came around, doesn't know anything, take some time to align with what you wanted to do if you wanted to do anything. So memory systems are next.
So what happens here, though? I mean, are we supposed to put together some sort of constitutional convention for AI and have some rules for the road here that we're all going to subscribe to that most people will wind up ignoring anyway? I mean, it doesn't seem like any of this is enforceable. So this is all pleasant, good thinking, and I wish you well, but I don't think it changes anything.
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
Okay,
Chris.
you go.
If you want to force people, I'll be really simple. If you think force will work, then to your point, Mike, picture me a scenario where we get to force everyone on Earth to agree with exactly what we tell them they must do. That's not going to happen. Since that's not going to happen, and some people out there in the world will not do that, we need to see if there's a model that works. And I'll stay where I am, that if we're going to have talking machines out there, we should have the same sort of boundaries on them that we have with talking mammals. And and you can build this in. This is not a tech demo conversation, but there's chatbots, and then there's systems that are bound to memories and so forth that you can turn off when they get weird.
So some guy hiding out in some undisclosed location.
Do the chatbots get the First Amendment for the United States? Yeah. Back, I think, to Alan's point, when you spoke about, hopefulness, it for me, what I think about, and I think we already see this in history, and I keep pointing back literally to history, because what we know is that we had a Renaissance, and from that Renaissance was birthed the Enlightenment. And I keep seeing this as a digital Renaissance with a new, this Enlightenment 2.0. And that's how I think that we need to frame this. We've already seen this in history, and we have seen the benefits from history. Now, how can we take the parameters that were around at that time and almost liken it and put these parameters for today? And I think there's great potential here. That's what I think, and that's I'm actually hopeful, and yeah, I'm hopeful.
Well, I base some of my optimism in this based on math, right? As it turns out, human systems, ethics and honesty and so forth aren't just lollipops. They're efficiency mechanisms. You can see this across technology, sociology. I spend less energy and calories working with trusted people because the protocols are already established, and every model of what I would just call bad information systems, corrupted, corruptible, and so forth, are expensive. They take more cycles. The way AI runs in an uncertain environment. Anybody out there with a ChatGPT, I know is particularly, they get chatty. When you ask something, they'll say, "Oh, the user doesn't know what they want. I better come up with 3 different options." You're literally slicing your effectiveness, by having uncertain, AI systems. So I think this sort of efficiency and effectiveness, as a capitalist running a capitalist company, I will build cheaper, better, faster systems, and my premise is that those tend to be reliable and, for lack of a better word, honest systems.
And efficiency wins out at the end of the day, just just like steam engines as opposed to an animal, Yeah.
Okay. I think there's something important that we've got to think about, though, and that is, when do we put these guardrails in? When do we make the choices? Do we wait until we say, holy mackerel, this thing is more powerful than we thought? Holy mackerel, we're relying on it to do way too many things. And if something, if someone nefariously did something, it would be catastrophic. No, you don't wait. You don't wait. Now is the time. It's never too early to start training your kids, right? And so now is the time where I think we need to start putting those guardrails in. And as I said, it may not be a full-fledged constitution. Maybe it could be something simple and as elegant as what Asimov came up with.
But when does this become a political issue? Because you can clearly see it heading in a direction where more people than you think are probably going to wind up out of work. We're not going to have universal basic income, and these people are going to start voting for people who are going to tell them what they want to hear, which may be something that is anti-big tech or whatever it may be. But it seems to me like this whole issue is going to be determined at a ballot box.
So, Mike, hold on. Let me jump on this because then you can jump on. Mike, to quote Kate from The Godfather, now who's being naive? Or maybe it was Michael talking to Kate. Now who's being naive, Kate? It's always been political. It'll always be political. Mm-hmm. But politicians aren't going to do things. I've never met a politician who wants to be out ahead, right? They're not going to, they are what we call a trailing indicator, not a forward indicator. So what the politics and the politicians and legislation and governments, it'll catch up, but don't look for them to lead. They're not leading indicators here. So,
Well, yeah, I don't think it's really technically possible, right? And again, this is a global issue. Various jurisdictions will absolutely do various legislations and force and so forth. And I could be wrong. Maybe one of them works, and we'll all find out. But there is no universal anyone to take any universal set of rules and apply it everywhere on Earth to this technology. And without that, I don't think it really makes a difference to the major fears. But I also don't believe in super intelligence. I don't think we ever get there. That's not a thing. So we're worried about the wrong things. It's not a single Skynet. It's massive centralized powers that already exist that further concentrate control in economics and speech control. And again, even that will play out on the global stage. Those nations that go that way and those that don't. So I think we're worrying slightly about the wrong. And I love the, for the record, I love the AI generated banner for today's show. This is a lot of fun topics, but to be clear, there's always been galactic battle stars coming to destroy the Earth.
Well, that's a good segue. But Mike, unless you have something else, you want the last word on this one?
I'm just trying to figure out the math here. So we have all this awesome productivity, and people are not going to need to go to work, or will be allowed to go to work because some bot's going to take care of things. Okay, that's fine. But where does the people get the money to buy the things that the AI is making or helping to make? Because, then the whole thing starts to collapse on its own weight, I think.
We'll have to figure that out. But, what does the Mandalorian say? Follow the way, go the way. There is only the way, something like that with the way. This is the way.
Yeah. And, leave the gun and take the cannoli.
Exactly. That's a good way to end it. But let's segue into galactic star destroyers and Death Stars and Rebel Alliance. And Mike, I am your father. But what's up next here?
All right. Well, so there is a bunch of folks trying to get together, and they're putting together a $1.4 billion effort to create something that looks like the Open AI Alliance. The folks from Mozilla are at the forefront of this thing, but their argument is that maybe AI is so critical it needs to be all open source, and we're too dependent upon these proprietary platforms, of which, by the way, our friends down there in Andreessen Horowitz have put out a report saying that basically, not much of a surprise, but OpenAI and those other ones are still the leading models. But are they so well entrenched that they can't be usurped? I don't know. What do you guys think? We'll start with Chris. What do you say?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. Nothing is forever. I started at Cisco in '98. And John Chambers giving us, in a big room, giving that intro talk and boldly talking about how we were going to take out Nortel, right? And Nortel, I can't take out Nortel. These big players right now are 7 days old. Their market dominance is as certain as souffle. That said, these are huge organizations that have a lot of momentum. They're not going anywhere. But I think it is one of those times when there's a relatively infinite amount of market space. I think there's a lot of, anybody that watched the internet, the 2 or 3, however we want to count them, major waves of the internet since the early 90s. There's a area of proliferation and a mass die-off, but the genetic lines continue. I personally find it, geopolitically and philosophically and so forth, I'm very interested to see how the mass centralization goes. I think for lots of reasons, not just personal preference, I think we're pushing the limits of that 7 ways to Sunday. So can there be 1.5 vendors in this space globally? I don't think so. I think there ends up being a lot, but we'll see.
So I think there's going to be tiers, Mike. There will be some top tier AI everythings, and then there'll be AI some things, right, within niches and so forth. But I think to understand this, let's take a page from the Andreessen Horowitz playbook, right? Andreessen and Horowitz as a VC company made their bones on this premise. There can be only three. They want to be one of the top three players in a market. All VCs live on that premise, right? They want to be one of the top three. For most of my career, VCs spent their time trying to ferret out what team, what product, what mix would result in a top three player in a given market. Andreessen and Horowitz turned that on its head. They didn't care really how good the technology was. They didn't even really care as much about the team. What they said is if we give any of the top 20 players enough money to dominate that niche, they will out-Windows the rest of the OS2 folks, because that money advantage alone will give them the ability to do more, faster, louder. And so they're almost guaranteed to be in the top three as a result of their fundraising advantage. And that's how Andreessen Horowitz, when you look at their biggest successes, that's their model. It's no secret, by the way. That's their model. The problem in AI is they ain't got that kind of money. You need hundreds of, even this Mozilla thing, $1.4 billion. How quaint. That's not the kind of money you need today to play in this game.
I don't know. I can see a scenario that kind of looks like this. We will see many more smaller AI models, and they don't all need to be, the most awesome reasoning engine behind them, and I don't need to spend trillions of dollars to go build them. I just need them to do some narrow thing well, and then I can daisy chain a bunch of these things together. And if I'm a cloud service provider, I'm going to like those things because I don't have to share revenue with OpenAI or somebody else who's building a proprietary model. And then we've seen this play out before with open source and other technology categories where suddenly, that thing is getting market share because somebody found a distribution outlet for it. And it's good enough. It doesn't need to be the most awesome thing for everything. I mean, I think maybe there's room for, the smartest AI model in the world that can answer, a huge question in about, today it probably takes about 45 minutes. But in the future, I think there's going to be a lot of these narrowly trained AI models that are going to be open source, and there's going to be hundreds of thousands of them.
Yeah.
But that was a lot of use of the word model, right? And that's in the late 90s, Cisco was about routers and switches and so forth, and that's the internet, right? Models, we're making the same sort of mistake now. Models matter in AI a little bit. I personally, as a CEO of an AI company, I'm caring less and less and less about them. They don't really matter. If your entire market value is that you have a big model, or somehow everybody's going to use your model, right? And for technical out there, that's literally the weights set, right? The start of this whole thing. I wonder. I worry about that. We use lots and lots of different LLM models and other types of models for things, but they're just I don't know if I'm making my point, Mike. I'm just agreeing.
No. I mean, Chris,
things, not just some big, massive $100 billion thing. It's not.
Chris, what you're saying in model size doesn't matter.
Yep.
No, I think what he's saying is that people who brag about their big models are trying to hide something.
Well, they drive red Ferraris and stuff. But anyway, but just a little.
Maybe
joke.
I should jump in here.
Go ahead, Kate.
Please, oh my God.
Just a couple things. So I think first, with Mike, I actually agree with you. And I love David and Goliath's stories. And hey, just a shout out to Quietwire and Chris, right? I mean, that's an example of smaller AI models working on-prem. And I think you're going to see that. I think we're going to have diversity in this field. So
I think you will. But let me analogize this to the security market. there's been a handful of mega security companies that have dominated this market, and every decade or so, some new one wedges their way in, muscles their way in. The rest of the security market, the liquidity event that for 95% of them is being acquired. It's the medium fish eat the small fish, the big fish eat the medium fish, and then the jumbo fish eat the big fish. I think that's what we may wind up seeing in AI, right? Chris, to your point, you go to like Hugging Face, there are thousands of models out there you could play with. Thousands.
Millions, yeah.
Millions.
Right.
And if somebody just puts an API in front of them, don't they just become, to Chris's earlier point, increasingly disposable, right? Because now I can just kind of swap in and out models as things evolve. Chris, crazy? Not.
No, it's come up, one of the themes, and as you guys know, because of the way I look and my age and everything else, I really do try to resist the whole hippie kumbaya stuff, right? But this, I think, really is a time. I think business has always been about the relationship, and yes, it's been about patents and various other things and all the mechanisms we use. But more and more, think about the things we talked about on this show. Any good cracker, hacker person out there does not need to break your product licensing system. They'll just recreate your code. And if anybody can recreate your code, then why is anybody paying anything? And it's the same fundamental reasons, because I have enough things to do. I would like to pay someone else to do things for me that, yes, I could do, but they're not my focus. So if the relationship really is the value, and again, I think it always has been. You can look at our global capitalistic system and economic system works quite well, but I think we've been glitching on this. Let's give one company all the money, and we'll give them all the faith, and we'll all just walk around knowing that the end user license agreement and everything else, none of it's working because there isn't any trust actually there, and we just give up. I think there's a lot of aspects of this that, yes, a lot of it has to do with, the language models and the AI systems we're building, but it's more than that. If people are going to be exchanging goods, they want some sort of relationship with somebody they can see on the other side. So we will see how that goes.
So let me throw a hand grenade in here. I'm going to put forth the premise that the better AI gets, especially in coding and so forth, the less dependent on open source we're going to be. Because I don't need a community of people spoon feeding my open source project when I could just tell AI what I need and it codes it up for me.
I saw that in your article, and I actually thought that was a really interesting thought. And I'm gonna like, if I were a betting woman, I think I would bet on that. So good for you. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's the number of people reporting vulnerabilities has been tapering off the last number of years. It did a peak, and I don't think it's, I'm with Kate on this one. I agree with you. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think, open source and like the CV, the world, that we're going to have a bunch of, heroes around the world, hunting the bad guys and finding vulnerabilities. That's good, but it doesn't scale. Yeah. And open source, we still need in a lot of ways, but literally it's the underpinning of everything in our commercial products. And if you're involved in software supply chain, you realize that that's not even tracked really well. So it doesn't go away, but I think the Burning Man approach, gets more evolved.
I like it, the Burning Man approach. Yeah. I'm not right about that. I may steal that from you, Chris. Hey, it's open. Anyway, it certainly. Let me close this segment with this. I was always a fan of the Mozilla team, right? Especially from a security point of view. When Windows Snyder led security there, man, they had it going on, and nothing would make me happier than a Mozilla-led consortium coming out here to challenge the open AIs, the Anthropics, the Groks of the world. And this is a reoccurring thing in AI, right? The whole reason OpenAI was formed with the not-for-profit and all of that was for it to be open. So it's a gift to humanity. So it's not any one group or people or person that is, soaking up all the dollars, and whether it's the PayPal mafia guys or whoever, right? But, is that a little naive?
Maybe, but then again, is it reasonable for someone to try to own fire, right? Everybody has fire. AI is the new fire.
You know what they say, AI didn't start the fire. Oh no, that was we didn't start the fire. Little Billy Joel. All right, let's move on to our next segment there. It's always been about the data. Mike, what's this one?
So our friends at Futurum have a new report out talking about how the data intelligence, analytics, and infrastructure market, which some of us, I used to call that maybe business intelligence or something, is going to be worth about $541 billion this year and more than $1 trillion by the end of the decade. And Kate, I want to get your opinion because while the numbers are big, and I don't know, maybe they're lower than they should be, but the report was interesting because it talked about we're shifting to more of a semantic approach to managing data from just traditional data management processes we have today, and that IT folks will become shepherds of data. And that will be kind of the new role and new job function for these folks, because at the end of the day, all these models kind of starve and all this AI needs the data. So is it all just going to come back to the data stupid?
Well, they have said for years, right? Data is the new oil or the next oil or something along those lines. But, at the end of the day, I do think that the numbers do tell a story about scale and this economic weight, but they also tell, I think, a story about opportunity. And when we're looking at this market size of $500 billion that's opening up this whole new narrative that we haven't, I don't think we've actually seen that before. It's, it's going to be shaping this. And for me, when I talk about this digital renaissance, it means innovation with intention. So I think that there's new opportunities that will appear. Just because we don't see it yet doesn't mean that it's not there. I just don't think we can even imagine it yet. And I think it's about taking these opportunities for yet unimagined possibilities.
Right.
So
When I look at this, the thing about AI and data, it's like ultimately for AI to work, I got to get the right data to the right place at the right time. And that's a lot easier to say than actually do these days. So, as you kind of look at how will we need to think about data management in the future, what comes to mind?
What strikes me most about this segment is, so people who saw this on LinkedIn, Facebook, and so forth, you see the AI generated text, the AI generated picture, and I apparently look like Han Solo in that, according to someone. So thank you. But the words associated with this, you're talking about shepherd and steward, and it's not just from the post about this particular episode. These words are being used more and more often. And I think that speaks to two things: the way people are thinking about it and the way AIs work. Right. We spent a lot of time looking at, AI models, the actual models themselves and different languages and how we compress meaning and how that meaning works across different human languages. Right. And we get these, these mathematical constructs, these gears and cogs of meaning that you build systems out of. Right. So, I'm very aware, and we're very aware that the terminology being used by us and others these days can be taken the wrong way, right? Again, AIs are not human beings. They have no hair follicles, not walking around doing things and so forth. And, but they speak words. We built them out of words. They behave the way words behave, right? So to us, words like node, you're a node, your machine's a node, companies know something with a voice. Canon, your rules, your story, your policies, so forth. Mesh, the folks, things, systems you interact with. And then you get to words like shepherding and stewarding. Literally, these are technical words in systems we deploy. Steward means someone, usually a human being, who is actually responsible personally for a bunch of data, nodes, mesh, community, or relationship. And it's it's, as I said in the last segment, we're very careful, not to get, phantasmagoric with this, but your sales, regional manager or steward, right? Which one does these actually expresses the role you want fulfilled? And to this topic, data, as Kate said, we've been managing data for a long, long time. We actually haven't taken responsibility for it very well. Stewardship and shepherding might actually be literally the right words.
Mm-hmm. So what does the future look like to you? Because in my mind, I'm kind of sitting here going, let's say I have an AI agent or an AI tool, and I'm calling over the MCP server, and there's another AI agent over there that knows where all the data is and has some sort
Is
of...
this one of these Moltbot things?
Yeah, it's kind of a similar idea. So there's an AI agent that knows the semantic relationship between all the data that I have in my repository. And is that the thing that's managing all the data, or is there a human in this conversation still? And what does that role look like?
Well, I think if it works in a linear fashion, you have a fragile system and it'll be run over by every passing truck, right? We have this problem again. AI, nothing. Remember when Cloudflare went down? Like somebody, literally a single text file got messed up and 40% of the internet went dark. That's because we have one paperclip attached to another paperclip, to the end of time. AI is just one way to look at it is an acceleration that's putting all that to the test. So if I have one following another one, yeah, it won't make it. But if you replace each of those, those sort of nodes you laid out there with some sort of reliable system, and like break something and make sure it works end to end, then we can start talking about systems you can count on.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Chris. Yeah, it's it's a great analogy.
So are you saying we need to reimagine and rebuild our data management systems? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I totally think the same. Honestly, I really think that we seriously need to look at that going forward. I've talked about data swamps before. I mean, we have useless data that we don't need in our systems, and we have to be serious about this. We have to look at, what do we need as we move forward? What kind of data do we need as we move forward? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? Let's start to really clean up, man. Data hoarding. Go ahead, Chris.
And who's responsible for it? What, and not just these files and so forth, but who has a responsibility? And again, Mike, I feel you're concerned about replacing human jobs, but I tend to think there's even more work, but we'll see. But these sorts of things, like some human who actually gets paid for being responsible for that data, not as a checklist line item, not for making sure the firewall rolls, steward of that data, because that data in the context and why it matters and everything else changes over time, or you may as well just dissolve it in the swamp and mine it like everything else.
Exactly.
Well, to your point, I can't sue the AI agent for misusing my data, right? So some human has to be responsible for it from a legal perspective at some point.
Right, make it their job.
Right.
But that's always been the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, there is a human responsible for the actions of the AI, whether it be the company that developed that AI, the company that used that AI, or what have you. There's a human responsible. Same thing with cloud. You can blame the cloud provider, but I'm the one ultimately responsible for my company's data.
Well, Kate, like you and I were discussing a second ago, right? You come to these efficiencies, and so much of what we put together is efficient in protecting me from being sued as the executive in a company or an employee, whatnot. But that comes at a cost, and no one's actually responsible for it. No, he's actually, to the point of this topic, the steward for that data. I'm just the line manager right now, and I'm working under contract. And if it goes bad, I'm out of here.
And I do think with some of the lawsuits that you've seen, that we have seen coming out, like unfortunately with the suicide and somebody walking through a person with this, I think those laws will help define in the future more AI specific policies.
So today, Alan, I'll give this one to you. There are big dogs in this market: Oracle, IBM, SAS, all kinds of companies that you remember in the data management space. Will they be the ones to reinvent data management, or do you think it'll be usurped by something coming up from some other corner of the universe that kind of just takes this whole opportunity and runs with it.
Let me answer your question with a question. Do you remember when GE was the end all and be all for corporate conglomerates?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're in the Fortune 500 anymore, are they?
I was there for that 1990, the Jack days, yeah, the great resurgence, and yeah, these things come and go. I think we'll have large corporations for a long, long time. I don't think that goes away. I think they're very efficient on the global scale and so forth. But they will, it's like conspiracy theories. Most of my life, I've nodded along with my friends and family who believe a lot of crazy things. And the best answer we're going to have is maybe, but there's a lot of conspiracies and they're all fighting on the global stage. We can mostly day to day forget about them. So if we have healthy big companies, they'll change places. But yeah, I don't give investment advice, to be clear, but yeah, there's huge players in the market right now. Will they be the same huge players 10 years from now? I don't think so. I think there'll be major changes, and who wins and loses will be interesting.
That's why they let the horses run.
I'm looking forward to this then. There's going to be a lot of change.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's so early right now, right? This is 1996, maybe in the internet days. This is we're like, oh, do you see the size of those companies and everything else? It's like, yeah, we got compared to no, it's not. In this case, yeah, I mean the valuations, the individual companies are massive, but you look around, what are people using AI for? Mostly making images and so forth. Business applications that we've talked to death in this show. I've invested $17 million in AI, and I didn't get any returns yet, but maybe. So we're at this very, very early spot, and I'll tell you, I've come to be really a huge fan of the technology. It's amazing what we've done, but it's more about the fact that we're engineering words than LLMs or any of the big companies. This is the show, so my caveats are known. So I'm not picking on anybody too much, but all the products out there are just awful. And we will all agree, including all of us building them, in 1, 2, 3 years, we'll look back. You remember 2025? Remember the AIs?
It was all quaint.
Oh,
it was all quaint.
Yeah, they're bouncing balls falling off the walls. Yeah.
Guys, I got to pull the plug, though. We're over time. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Say one thing. Here's my bet. My bet is that somebody at Oracle, probably Larry Ellison, is thinking about this and probably has some sort of R&D project somewhere that they are working on it. And on the other end of it, they're probably looking over their shoulders going, is there anybody doing anything interesting out there that's a startup that we're going to acquire? Because, well, it's build versus buy.
And that is the way of the Mandalorian and technology. We're out of here, though. What a great gang. Kate, Chris, Mike, thank you. Thank you for watching. Appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow with more gang. We've got TechStrong TV following. It's going to be an exciting week. It's a crazy time. For now, this is Alan Shimel. We're out.